Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. Today's episode, I'm going to get started with Blood Magic. Now, the Blood Magic mod is a magic-based mod that uses the idea of life power to achieve various effects. So, like Botania uses flower power, Blood Magic uses life power. And like Botania, it's deceptively simple. You know, with Botania, you generate flower power and then you use it to achieve various effects, but the way you can combine things makes it much more powerful than it might appear to be on the surface. And Blood Magic is similar to that. The basic concepts of it are very simple, but once you start getting into it and doing things, you can achieve a whole lot of stuff. Now, there are a lot of videos out there about Blood Magic, so this is not really going to be any kind of a tutorial on it. It's more just going to show you how I'm going to be using it, what I'm going to be doing with it, you know, stuff like that. There will be some basics, but I'm not going to do a whole lot of basics. With that being said, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'll be happy to try to explain things or go back and better explain something if I didn't explain it very well, and answer any questions that you might have. Now, to start off with Blood Magic, the first thing is this Blood Altar. And the Blood Altar is fairly simple to make, but in the end, you'll be able to upgrade this Blood Altar by turning it into a multi-block structure. And I think by the end of it all, it's about a 17 by 17 structure. So what I've done is I have made myself a 25 by 25 structure, which you can kind of see over there. And sometimes I forget how to get up to it. I think this will do. And so there is my 25 by 25 structure. Now I'm actually using Ender.io travel anchors to get around, and I've set one on top of the structure here like that. The travel anchors are pretty cool. I've got one here in the factory, one here in Botania land in the greenhouse, and even one over at the house where there is a wither cat. It is not a great sign. Oh, these things are tough to kill. Oh, I did it. Ha, one shot kill. That's pretty cool. All right, let me sleep this night away. So the travel anchors make it easy for me to get around, and especially to get up here because I have built this sort of along cliff edges, and that means that there is no way to get up here in any other fashion. I believe I've made this platform about 25 by 25 or so it should be big enough to store the finished final version of the Blood Altar once it gets upgraded. So go ahead and place the Blood Altar block right down here in the center, like so, and it looks like that. Now there is no GUI for it or anything. And again, Blood Magic operates off of life power. And to start off with, the only way to get that life power is to take it from yourself. And the way you do that is with this sacrificial knife. Now, if you right-click with the sacrificial knife, you'll notice a couple things will happen. One, I'll lose a heart of health. And two, you'll see some of the life power appear within the altar. So see, you can see it in there in the altar. Now at this point, we still don't have a way to determine how much life power is actually in the altar. We're going to work on that later. But that is the basics of it. And of course, every time I do this, more life power will get put into the altar, and I will lose another heart of health. Now I can do this when I'm away from the altar, and I will lose a heart of health, but it will not go into the altar. You actually have to be standing somewhat close to the altar in order for the altar to receive your life power that's coming from your own body. So of course, without any natural regeneration, this is not going to work out very well for me. I'm obviously going to keep taking damage and not heal it away. And so I need to remedy that situation, and of course I'm going to use my friend from Botania, the Fallen Canaday. If you remember, the Fallen Canaday gives me a regeneration effect. I have one right here, and you can see it is healing me up fairly well and fairly quickly. But of course, I don't want to have to travel back and forth to do that, so I will put a Fallen Canaday somewhere here where I can have its effects while I'm using my Blood Altar. One Fallen Canaday later with a mana pool, and now I have some regeneration next to the Blood Altar. And I decided to put it underground, cover it up. I almost put it up above didn't like the way that looked so much. Plus, kind of already know there's going to be stuff up above anyway. So at least now I'm here, I can get some healing in. So when I do have to drain my life power out of myself, at least it will heal back up. There is, you'll notice, a hunger effect that happens, and I'm not entirely sure on that. I believe that the author of the Blood Magic mod hadn't intended for people to be able to regenerate as I'm doing here and generate more life power that way. It makes things a little bit too easy. So I believe that that author has added the hunger effect whenever it detects a regeneration effect around the blood altar. Not entirely certain about that, but that's my understanding of it. And honestly, I gotta tell you, it makes sense. It does make using this mod a lot simpler. Incidentally, over there is my field of day blooms and nightshades, which will generate the flower power and send it through over to the Fallen Khanate to keep me healed up. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to get a diamond, because the next thing that I want to make is a weak blood orb. Now, there are different tiers of blood orbs. It starts off with weak, it goes to apprentice, then to magicians, and then to the master blood orb, and that is it, I believe. Now, this will show you how the item is made. The blood altar actually serves as a sort of a crafting type of a block. And so you can see here, if I put in a diamond in at least a tier 1 altar, it goes from tier 1 to tier 5. So you can always do it in a higher tiered one, but you need at least a tier 1 altar. And if it has 2,000 life power in the altar, then it will turn that diamond into the weak blood orb. The problem, of course, is how much life power is in the blood altar. At this point in time, we don't know. There is a way to solve that problem. We'll work on that later. But as it stands now, there's no way to know it. Now, usually, when you use the knife, you generate about 200 life power. And so that would mean, effectively, I should be able to use the knife on myself 10 times, and that would generate 2,000 life power. Now, once you have what you hope is enough life power in the blood altar, you can right-click it with the item that you want that you're using. And as you can see, I did that with the diamond, and I get with these little squigglies that come up. And after some amount of time, just depends on how long it takes, that should turn into the weak blood orb. Okay, and there is the blood orb. So I can take that back out, and you can see it here in my inventory. When you make stuff with the Blood Magic mod, the first thing you want to do when you have it is right-click with it. That sort of binds it to you. You can see here now it says current owner, and it has my username on it. So you always want to bind everything to you. Now, you also notice that when I did that, if I right-click with the blood orb, I'm generating I'm draining my own health in order to generate life power. But that life power is not going into this blood altar. But to kind of show that better, the next thing I need to make is something called a Sigil of Divination. And the Sigil of Divination is here. And so you can see here that it uses a blood orb, any of these kinds, in order to make it. Now that will never use up your blood orb. It just requires it as part of the crafting process. In this case, I can use anything from the Archmage's orb, the Master orb, the Magician's orb, the Apprentice orb, or the Weak orb. Now, some of the crafting items will require only the higher tiered orbs, so you have to keep that in mind as well. And making the higher tier orbs require different things. For example, to make the Apprentice blood orb requires a tier 2 altar, which I don't have. I only have a tier 1 so far. Or making the Magician's altar requires the tier 3 altar, etc. The other thing that the sigil needs, you'll see here, is this blank slate. And blank slates are made by putting stone into a tier 1 blood altar with at least 1,000 life points. So let me work on making that. And again, these blank slates are made in the Blood Altar. Again, you just need to make sure you have the right tier or higher of Blood Altar, as well as the right number of life power, and put that in. Takes a little bit of time, and it will turn it into a blank slate. Shouldn't be too long here. I should be able to wait for it yeah, there it goes. And so then you have the blank slate. I made one previously, as you can see. And so now I can make this sigil of divination like that, and there it is. Oh, I'm taking hunger damage. So this will require me to have probably a food farm. I haven't really made one yet, but I'll probably work on making one. And now I have the Divination Sigil. So the Divination Sigil will tell us how much life power we have in anything that we're dealing with. So if I right-click this on the Blood Altar, you can see there it says Altar's current essence 1600 life power. It's currently a tier 1, and it has the capacity for 10,000 life power. That's the maximum. If I click anywhere that's not a Blood Altar, you will see I have current essence of 400 life power. Now this was something that confused me at the beginning, so when I first played with this mod, so I want to explain that. The Blood Altar itself holds life power. In this case, it's got 1600 life power, and it can go up to a maximum of 10,000. But kind of you yourself also can store up some life power, and that's what you get when you click not on a Blood Altar. In this case, what I have stored up is 400 life power. So remember when I right-clicked with this weak Blood Orb and it damaged me? That will actually add 200 life power to my essence, to what I'm currently storing. So you can see I have 600. If I do it again, now I have 800. If I go back over to the Blood Altar, you can see it's got 1600 life power in it. If I use the weak Blood Orb, it will still show 1600, because using the weak Blood Orb to damage myself will give me life power, whereas the rain will wash away the spiders. No, that's something else. Okay, if I use the sacrificial knife by the altar, that's what adds life power to the altar itself. So the life power currently, or the Blood Altar currently has 1600 life power. Use the knife, and now it has 1800 life power. It has 1800 life power. If I use the knife, and I have 1000 life power, if I use the knife over here, I still only have 1000 life power, and the altar still only has 1800 life power. So you have to make sure that you're using the right tool in the right location for what you want to do. If you want life power stored up within yourself, you want to use your orbs to take damage. If you want life power in the altar, then you want to use the sacrificial knife. And those two sources, those two pots of life power are separate, and it's important to remember that. Now, there is a way to take life power out of the altar and put it into yourself, but you can't go the other way around. And that's also an important thing to remember. So basically, you just want to know that there are two separate pools of life power. And the pool of life power that's in this altar, that's what's used when we want to make these blank slates by dropping in the stones. That's how we make these orbs, by dropping in these various items. This life power has to be in the altar. It can't be within yourself. So, for example, right now I have 1000 life power in myself, and there's 1800 life power in the altar. So if I took a stone, in order to become a blank slate, requires 1000 life power. So if I put that in there, what you'll see is the altar is draining. You can see it started at 1800 and it's going down. When it's used up the 1000 life power, so it's down to 800, then it turned that stone into a blank slate, and I can take it out. But you'll see that my life power, which is still at 1000, that was never touched. So now if I put in another stone, again, there's only 800 life power in the altar. There's not enough to turn it into a blank slate. So it's going to drain all the life power, and then it's going to stop. And you'll get this gray particle effect, meaning it's not working anymore. But you'll notice that while I have 1,000 life power in me, none of that is being used to turn that stone into a blank slate. So again, just important to remember that there is a separation in those pots of life power and what you can do with them. Incidentally, because I didn't add more life power to the altar, the process of turning this stone into a blank slate has completely stopped. And I can start it up again, but I will need a fresh 1,000 life power. So that 800, I basically wasted it by not having enough in there to begin with. So as I've said, this currently as it stands is a tier 1 altar. And the idea in Blood Magic is that you will constantly work towards upgrading your altar to first to tier 2, then tier 3, then tier 4, and then finally the ultimate, which would be the tier 5 blood altar. Upgrading your altar unfortunately requires adding, as I said, it's a multi-block structure, so it involves adding things around the altar that build it up. And the primary thing that you make around it are various kinds of runes. Now these runes, as you can see, are made from these blank slates. There's different kinds of runes. The various runes that you can use to upgrade the tiers on your altars achieve different effects. The sort of the basic one that doesn't do anything but will count towards increasing your tier level. I've got to back away from the regeneration effect because it's causing me to get hungry, which will eventually cause me to get damage. The blood rune, is used in crafting some of the other runes, but it's primarily just sort of a filler in case you don't want to go through the efforts of making some of the other types of runes. It requires these blank slates and some stone. It's pretty easy. There is the Rune of Self-Sacrifice, which is made like this. And the Rune of Self-Sacrifice, when you damage yourself to put life power into the rune, that will generate more than the standard amount. And the Rune of Sacrifice is when you damage somebody else or something else, and it generates more that way as well. There are Runes of Capacity, which will increase how much life power your blood altar can store. There's Efficiency Runes, which will, I'm not exactly sure what they do, to be honest with you. Speed runes make the sort of the crafting process faster. Basically, there's all these different kinds of runes, and these runes are used in making the blood altar into a multi-block structure and to a higher tier. So my next goal at this point in time is to increase the tier level of the blood altar as much as possible. The easiest runes to make are these blood runes, as I mentioned, a couple of blank slates, some stone around your weak blood orb. And if you make 8 of those, you can place them in a circle kind of around the blood altar like that, and that will upgrade the blood altar to a tier 2 blood altar. As you can see there, altar's current tier is 2. Now the capacity doesn't increase, it just allows you to make the higher tier, the items that require a higher tier blood altar. For example, one of the things that I want to be able to make is this right here, the Dagger of Sacrifice, and that requires a tier 2 altar. I couldn't make it prior to this point, but now I can. And why do I want to make it? Well, the Dagger of Sacrifice is to other mobs what the sacrificial knife is to me. So now if I make that, I can use other mobs' life power instead of using my own. And that will just make things, simpler for me. So I will make one of those as soon as I'm able to. Okay, so 3,000 life power and a basic iron sword. Put that in there, and after some time, that will turn into the, what is it called again? The Dagger of Sacrifice. All right, it's almost there, and there it is, the Dagger of Sacrifice. Now, the Dagger of Sacrifice is an extremely poor weapon. I do not recommend using it to fight with. It's probably worse than using bare fists to fight anything with. But if you use a Dagger of Sacrifice within a block or two of the Blood Altar, it will automatically kill any mob, no matter how many hit points it has. Even the infernal mobs with Vengeance will die from one hit. And that makes it and then the life power from that mob will then get funneled into your Blood Altar. And so that makes it a very useful tool indeed. I had to raise the elevation of my Blood Altar. I forgot that, as you can see, that level of runes below the Blood Altar, it's one block below. And I had forgotten that as the multi-block structure is expanded, it goes down a level. So that's why it's raised up the way that it is. But now I have a tier 2 Blood Altar, and I have the Dagger of Sacrifice, so I can use other mobs' life power instead of using my own. But I don't have much of a desire to just randomly harm any mobs. I mean, sure, some of them try to kill me, but, you know, for the most part, I'm a peace-loving kind of an individual. But I do have a special vendetta against the Martian Mafia and the creepers that help them. So them, I don't mind sacrificing. I'm going to build a system by which I can provide creepers to this Blood Altar and use them to provide me with life power. And I'll build what I need to build between this episode and the next. But that's going to do it for this episode. A really brief introduction to blood magic. Again, pretty common mod. It's out there and there's a lot of videos on it, so you've probably seen it before. There's not anything new or exciting I can show you on it that you probably haven't already seen. But if you do have any questions or you have any comments, please leave them for me in the comment section below. I enjoy hearing from you. I do try to answer any questions I receive, so feel free to ask away. That's going to do it for this episode. As always, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.